Hey everyone, this is MusicTechHelpGuy, and today I want to show you 13 shortcuts, or key commands as Apple calls them, that have helped me speed up my Logic Pro 10 workflow. Now obviously I'm going to skip the most basic navigation shortcuts that pretty much everyone knows. So everyone probably knows to press spacebar to play and stop, R to record, Command 2 or X to pull up the mixer, and Command 4 or P to pull up the piano roll editor. So I'm skipping things like this because I assumed that most everyone already knows these, and if not, well, there's a little bonus for you. And just a bit of a disclaimer, most of these shortcuts I'll show are actually a pair or a set of shortcuts. So there's really a lot more than 13 that I'll be showing total, and these are in no particular order. So let's get into this. So the first shortcut I'll show you is a pretty basic one, but I don't think everyone uses this regularly, and it's really the only transport control shortcut that I'll show you, and it's actually a set of 4 shortcuts. So this is comma and period. Basically what this does is comma makes the playhead jump backward by 1 bar at a time, and period makes the playhead jump forward by 1 bar at a time. Now I remember these by looking at the shift modifiers for these, which are the less than and greater than brackets. Also, if you hold shift while using these, you can jump back and forward by 8 bars at a time. The next 2 are split and join. You can press Command T to split a region by the playhead, so you just select the region and then set the playhead where you want to split, and then press Command T to split the region. And there's also another split command called split by locators. So what you do is you set the locators wherever you want them to go, and then you press Control Command T, and it splits the region at the left and right locator position. For joining regions, there's 2 commands for this. There's Command J, which joins regions on one track, and then there's also join by track, which is just J, which will join several different regions on different tracks, but keep them on separate tracks. So if I were to use Command J and drag over all of these regions on separate tracks, it'll actually join all of them together as one stereo audio file. If I press J instead of Command J to join by track, it'll keep each track separate, but join each of these regions on each track. The 4th shortcut I want to show you is called Note to remove overlaps with adjacent. Basically, this is just a fancy description of remove overlaps, and the shortcut for this is backslash. So what you do is drag over any MIDI notes with overlaps and press backslash on the keyboard, and it'll automatically trim the back end of the notes to remove the overlaps. Another really useful MIDI note trim feature is called Note End to Following Notes, also known as Force Legato. The shortcut for this is Shift backslash. So this is super useful because Logic doesn't have a quantized note end function. Even though Studio One and Pro Tools both have it, Logic still to this day in 2018 doesn't have it. So what this does is it trims the end of the note to extend it out to the front end of the following note. So one thing I find myself doing all the time with my MIDI recordings is playing in the MIDI data, then quantizing the notes to the grid, then pressing backslash to remove the overlaps, and then pressing shift backslash to force legato. So I find myself doing this all the time. So these 2 MIDI shortcuts for trimming are incredibly useful for MIDI editing. The next one is actually a pair of shortcuts that I use for step input. If you don't know what step input is, it basically allows you to input MIDI data from your MIDI controller without having to record the MIDI sequence in real time. So Option Command K will pull up the step input keyboard, and then to input MIDI data from your MIDI keyboard, you have to turn on MIDI input, which effectively turns on step input. So to do this, you press Option I. Now in addition to this, you can press 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 on your number row to choose your step input value. So these make step input really quick and really easy. Now most people know the basic zoom shortcuts in Logic. Command up and down zooms vertically, and Command left and right zooms horizontally. But there's another zoom shortcut that I really love, and it's very simple. It's just Z on the keyboard. This actually does 2 things. One, if you select a region or regions or even a selection of MIDI notes and press Z, it will zoom everything that you selected to fit the window. So the other thing you can do with this is you can click on the background of either the piano roll editor or the main window and press Z, and it'll zoom to fit everything within the window. If you work with outside loops a lot, this next one is particularly useful. Option Command T pulls up the tempo detection dialog. So this analyzes audio regions and detects the average tempo of the region, including the half-time and double-time tempos. You can choose to apply the region tempo to the project, including any tempo variants the region may have, or you can flex the region to the project tempo. Let's jump back to the piano roll editor for a bit. One really useful MIDI shortcut is transposing. So if I make a selection of notes, you can press Option up or down, and what this will do is it'll transpose the notes up or down in semitones or half steps. Additionally, you can press Shift Option up or down, and you can shift the notes up or down in full octaves or 12 semitones at a time. So this is great if you want to audition something up an octave or down an octave from the original pitch. Number 10 is a set of shortcuts that have to do with the cycle range. So pretty much everyone knows that you can click up here and drag to the right to create a cycle or loop range. Now, what you can also do is you can command click on this to create a skip cycle range. So what this does is instead of looping the cycle range, it actually skips the range so you can audition something without an entire section in the mix. Now, what you can do is you can press C to toggle the cycle range on and off. But the real shortcut here that I use all the time that saves a lot of time is Command U. And what Command U does is it sets the locators for the cycle range by regions or events. So you can select an individual region or a selection of regions or even a selection of events in the piano roll editor. And what it'll do is it'll create the locators at the left and right side of that selection. So then when you're using cycle mode, you can loop this area over and over again. So this is really useful if you want to just select all the regions and say the verse of a song and then loop that area over and over again. This is also useful when you want to select everything in your mix to bounce. You just hit Command A to select all, then press Command U to set the locators by regions or events, and then press Command B to bounce. Now, if you do voiceover work or edits that don't necessarily have to line up with the grid often like I do, because I make YouTube videos and I'm editing dialogue fairly often, this one is shuffling clips to be flush against each other. So what I often find myself doing is cutting out parts of dialogue and editing out parts of dialogue that either draw on too much, or maybe I just made a mistake and I want to cut it out, and I want to shuffle over the dialogue to be flush with the region previous to it. So what you can do is you can select one region or a whole selection of regions, and you can press Option bracket left or bracket right. And what this will do is it'll shuffle all of the clips over to the left or over to the right so that any of the gaps from editing, from trimming, are gone because all of the regions are going to be right next to each other. Number 12 is bounce in place, and the shortcut for this is Control B. This is a pretty basic one that I think most people know, but if you don't know it, it's incredibly helpful because you can bounce a region in place with any edits. You can also include automation. You can include effects plugins. One of the first things I'll do when I'm vocal tuning, either using Melodyne or using Auto-Tune Pro, what I'll do is I'll tune up the vocals and then I will bounce all of the Melodyne or Auto-Tune edits into the region so that I no longer have to have that plugin loaded. Then I have a fully tuned track that I can move on to mixing with. And I really save a heck of a lot of CPU power by not having Melodyne or Auto-Tune loaded. And number 13, the last shortcut I'll show you, has to do with selecting the edit tools more quickly. You can do this in either the main window or the piano roll editor. So instead of coming up here and selecting your edit tools with your mouse, you can just press T on your keyboard and pull up a menu of edit tools to select. In addition, you can press an individual shortcut for each tool. So if I want to quickly move back and forth between the pointer tool and the scissors tool, you can press TI to select the scissors tool, then TT to select the pointer tool again. In addition, you can assign the secondary tool or command click tool by holding command when choosing the tool. Now, one last thing to mention is that you can actually customize any of Logic's shortcuts by pressing Option K to pull up your key commands dialog. And then here you can customize each one. I actually have a separate video on that if you're interested, and I'll leave a link to it in the video description below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.